Now, I gave you guys a very quick rundown of why it's important in Islam. But let's talk about action a little bit. So, there are many things you can do to help yourself, obviously, and other people. To understand really why Muslims care about this. And the most important step to take is obviously educate yourself, but also pass the knowledge. I have the 2 books that I used for this presentation. This book, and also the other book that's over there, written by Taher. It's called Palestine Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And there's a lot of information there about what this means, the history. There's a lot of details in here that I didn't talk about, but the history and the real veneration and the affinity that Muslims hold with this land. And it's not just like, oh no, we own the land, you shouldn't be here. But it's really why people fight for this cause. Why there's people from all over the world that are willing to go and fight and die for this. Why last week, on May 15th, people marched on Palestine from all over the world. I mean, there's reasons for that. There's reasons why people ride on boats in high seas, in small, like 20-foot boats in high seas, to go to Gaza and break the siege and get shot. There's reasons why people do these things. Because they hold this affinity with not just the people, but they have this affinity with the land that is considered holy, not by just Muslims, but by Christians and Jews as well. So the injustice occurring there really reflects upon the attitude of the world on how they feel about the religions, and how they feel about God. So these are some of the things that I talked to you guys about. I'm sure you guys have some questions, but there's specific things that I went over that I didn't want to, like I said, bore you guys with. But if you have questions, please let me know. That's pretty much what I have to say. And yeah.
Taher,
Yeah.
is there still a Zionist presence in the Ibrahim Mosque?
Yeah, there still is.
There still is?
Yeah. My friend Tariq went there last summer, and he said that they can't even make that then.
What is it? What is the question?
Is there still Zionists inside the mosque? In this mosque?
The Ibrahimi Mosque.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is. Like they're still there, like the Zionists, like they still occupy a certain area of the mosque.
Why for? What's the
Because they say that this used to be a land where a Jewish temple used to be or something like that.
even there goes?
Yeah. Even though it's far from Jerusalem. But they say that Muslims intentionally build mosques on top of their places of worship to just make them mad.
So why is it called Ibrahim Mosque?
Oh, you came in late?
Yeah.
The reason why it's called the Ibrahimi Mosque is because that's where the Prophet Ibrahim is believed to be buried.
Oh.
Him and his wife Sarah and their kids. So this is a very, very old mosque. Yes, sir. You had a question? Oh. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Are they Zionists or like devoted Jews that?
Yeah, hardcore Zionists. Yeah, hardcore. We kind of devoted Jews that want to kill the Palestinians. Hardcore Zionists.
So I mean, like a lot of, from what I understand, like a lot of Zionists are real political.
Yeah, they're
people.
Yeah. We have the far right, establishment in Israel, which are very like hardcore religious Jews or consider themselves religious, that occupy like the settlements in the West Bank as well. They're the ones that want to expand the settlements. They're the ones that want to build more, take over Jerusalem completely. You have those movements as well. So those are those people.
My question is, I mean, the Jews and Muslims could pray together if the Jews are actually there. Pray because
no, they could pray in the mosque if they
want
wanted
to.
to.
Any problems with Jews and Muslims?
No, that's not the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is they want to take over the mosque.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Yeah, they could pray there if they wanted to. They've prayed there before. I didn't talk about the Crusades, which is a very defining era for Palestine, because Muslims controlled Palestine from like I said, 698 till the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. But there was a 100-year gap in which the Crusaders controlled the area. And that time was probably one of the worst times for Palestine. Crusaders did things that you would consider, even in our times, like brutal, which we kind of been accustomed to brutality, but even at their time, it was insane. They literally picked up babies and threw them against walls. I mean, that's what they did. So the Crusaders at that time really destroyed, even for Christians that lived in that area, took away a lot of their rights as well. So even like some Christians fought along Muslim lines against the Crusaders at the time, because they were like pissed off. Some dudes from Europe just coming in and taking back Palestine. And actually this mentality, this Crusader mentality, kept going, by the way, even after the Crusades. So 200 years after the Crusades, Christopher Columbus, and I learned this in my American history class, by the way. Christopher Columbus wanted to sail to India. Why? He didn't want to go for spices. He literally, and he wrote this in his diaries. He sailed to India to gather troops so they can go to Palestine and take it over again for the Crusaders. This is like his mentality. Then he ended up coming to America and he realized, dang, this is better than Palestine. So, so this is reality. These guys still have the mentality. The British, for example, when they took Palestine in 1922, there was a British general that when he entered Palestine and the British fully controlled the area after the Ottomans, he said, now the Crusades are over. Now the Crusades are over. So imagine, people still had this in their mind. A lot of the Westerners in Europe still had this anger, this tension with the Muslim world, and they wanted to pay them back. So, that had a big role in shaping the way people thought about the Muslim world, especially in regards to Western Islamic relations. So this region is very volatile in that sense. I'm going to read you guys some stuff. The last Ottoman Caliph, okay? The last Ottoman Caliph, his name was Abdul Hamid, if I'm not mistaken. And the Zionist movement in the late 1800s offered him a deal. They offered him money for Palestine, basically. They said, look, we'll give you, at that time, they offered him, let me look at the exact number, according to the book. They offered him a very large, substantial amount, and he rejected it. And he wrote this in his diary, by the way. He wrote this in his diary. Let me find it for you guys. His name is Abdul Hamid. Here, okay, I have it. Basically, this is what he says. The Zionists offered to purchase Palestine, okay? He said, Theodor Herzl, the founder of the World Zionist Organization, wrote in his diaries about his offer to the Sultan Abdul Hamid. He said about this offer and Sultan Abdul Hamid's response to his offer. So Abdul Hamid responded to the Zionist movement. This is what he said. This is Herzl talking. In the evening, Lulinsky returned from Yildiz kiosk with a long face and bad news. The Sultan said, if Mr. Herzl is your friend, as you are mine, then advise him not to take another step in the Palestine matter. I cannot sell or surrender even a single foot of land, for it does not belong to me, but to my people. My people have won this empire by fighting for it with their blood and have fertilized it with their blood. We will again cover it with our blood before we allow it to be wrested away from us. The men of 2 regiments from Syria and Palestine let themselves be killed one by one at Plevna against the Bulgars. Not one of them yielded. They all gave their lives on that battlefield. The Turkish Ottoman Empire belongs not to me, but to the Turkish people. I cannot give away any of it. I cannot give away any of it away. I don't know why he said that. Let the Jews save their billions. When my empire is partitioned, they may get Palestine for nothing. But only our corpse will be divided. I will not agree to the dissection at the time, he said. So these are the things that he said. And this is in the Sultan's diaries. You want to have a question? Oh. Okay, after, yeah. So this is the Sultan's diary, and this is what he says in his own letter, basically, as he was conceding power of the caliphate. You want to save your question just real quick. He said, I abandoned the Islamic caliphate for one reason and one reason only, which I now set forth, because I did not accept the establishment by the Jews of a national homeland in Palestine within the Ard al-Muqaddasa. The leaders of the Ittihad continuously exercised pressure and threats upon me. However, I decisively refused to accept this proposal. In the end, they promised to give me 150 million English pounds sterling. This proposal too I rejected decisively and answered them as follows. Not only 150 million English pounds, even if you were to give me simply not even 150 million sterling, but a whole world full of gold, still I would definitely reject your proposal. For more than 30 years I have served the people of Islam and the Ummah of Muhammad, and I will not blacken the pages of the Ummah of the Muslims and of my forefathers and ancestors from among the sultans and the caliphs of the family of Uthman. Therefore it is impossible that I should ever accept your proposal. And then he later on says, after I gave them this decisive answer, they agreed amongst themselves to depose me. And this is when he talks about them, he talks about the Young Turks, the Turkish nationalist movement that was trying to get rid of the caliphate at the time, and told me that they would send me to Salonika, and this proposal of theirs I was obliged to accept. By Allah, I have given and continue to give thanks to Allah. I did not accept the proposal that would have divided the lands of Islam and made Palestine a national home for the Jews. Thereafter, I continued to give thanks to Allah. I will be enough, I hope, to clarify my stance on this issue and close my letter. You signed, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, 22 Aylul, 1329 Hijri, servant of Allah, Abdul Hamid bin Abdul Majid. So this is what he said. I mean, and it's a very powerful statement. And honestly, one of the things that's very important is that they played a significant role in the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the Zionist movement, because they needed the land. Yes, sir. Or actually, she had a question for you.
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned this, but when did people start calling it Palestine? Or when did it start being called Palestine?
Right, so Palestine really was used a little bit before the British Mandate. The British Mandate, they officially called it Palestine in an English sense. Before then, it was called Bilad al-Sham, like Palestine was like part of it. Al-Quds, al-Ard al-Muqaddasa, Bayt al-Maqdis, they used to call it also. And in Hadith, it's called Bayt al-Maqdis, always. Palestine areas, like most often than not. Palestine really, honestly, I think it really started being called Palestine during that era, during the British era.
It's used a lot in the Bible, the Philistines are people that lived there.
But I don't know if that's necessarily related to it. The book talks about it.
Yeah.
I just forgot what the book said. He talks about why it's called Palestine, but you guys could read that. But I remember, like specifically, he said that the root comes from a group of people that came to Palestine and then they just lived there for a long time, back like thousands of years ago.
Yeah,
Two questions. What's this book title?
This book is called Jerusalem and Islamic Consciousness, a textual survey of the Muslim claims and rights to the sacred city.
By who?
By Dr. Hatem Bazian, University of California, Berkeley.
And then back to the letter you're reading from the
Yeah.
Sultan. What year did he sign?
He signed it at 1329 Hijri.
Since that's about like
1329 Hijri, which is like
That's 600.
1900 something.
You said 1390.
It's after World War II, so like
1329 Hijri. So
19.
after World War I.
After World War I.
Right now we're 1432, so
Yeah, so
40 years.
100 years. 100 years ago. Yeah.
I think
Basically,
it's after
110
World
years
War
ago. This is something else that the author said. The removal of Sultan Abdul Hamid brought the Zionist program appreciably closer to being a reality in a matter of 12 years. Palestine was no longer ruled by a Muslim ruler. There thus came to an end the Islamic rule over Palestine that had started in the time of Umar and ended with the defeat of the Ottomans and the beginning of the British occupation. Important to conclude from this chapter is that Muslims had continuous control over the land in Bayt al-Maqdis, participated in its affairs at all levels, and supported the dynasties which ruled over the land from one generation to the next. Finally, the last dynasty to rule over Bayt al-Maqdis, that of the Ottomans, did not relinquish any of the inhabitants' rights to the land and refused to bargain in any way for political and economic gain, a point which engenders respect for them from Muslims in the present age. So this is really like the end of Muslim rule in Palestine at that point. And then the rest is history basically. So technically, Muslims have not been able to, or have not had full control over Palestine since 1919. Today is 2011, so almost 100 years. Since then, the State of Israel has been around for 63 years. Yes.
When did the Zionist ideology come about?
Zionist ideology came about in the late 1800s, 1880s, 1896 officially. It was established as an ideology. Taher Herzallah wrote a book called The Jewish State, in which that was the basis for the propagation of the ideology, where they had a conference, they had like multiple Zionist congresses in Europe, and that's where really they began planning and executing these things. And he even in his congress, in those days, Taher Herzl never saw the establishment of the State of Israel. He died before he was even established. But that day, when he was in the conference in 1896, he said that today I realized my dream of creating a Jewish state, basically. And he wasn't even like a religious Jew. I had a presentation earlier today at RCC. He was a secular person. He had no connection to Judaism really. He didn't even have a bar mitzvah. He had like a confirmation of him being a German boy that was secular, that didn't believe in religion. He actually viewed religion with like this cynicism. Even if you look at historically, the prime ministers of Israel, Ben Gurion, for example, the first prime minister, he was like Buddhist. He wasn't even Jewish. He didn't believe in God. So the fact that they say that this state of Israel is the protector of Judaism, of the Jewish people, of the Jewish principle, I mean that could not be further from the truth, to be honest with you. Honestly, and I think Jewish people lived in Palestine much more safely and arguably comfortably during the Ottoman Empire days than they do now today in Israel. Definitely, yes.
When was the country of Palestine established?
Country of Palestine? It was not.
It wasn't
So yeah.
country.
So what happened is, after the Ottoman Empire collapsed, the British and the French took control of the area. So the French took over Lebanon and Syria and like other parts of North Africa, and the British took Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Palestine, like Saudi had what they never got taken over. They got their own land. Yeah, Saudi. But basically what happened is the Saudis at the time, which was King Hussein at the time, he made an agreement with a man named McMahon in Britain. So it's called the McMahon-Hussein agreements, in which they said, look, we'll take your sons, oh Hussein, oh Bedouin tribal dude from Saudi, we'll take your sons and we'll make them kings, right? He said, great. So basically we'll make them king of Iraq, king of Jordan, king of this, king of that, and that's how they're going to split the land. At the same time, the British and French were meeting, and they made a secret agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Who's heard of the Sykes-Picot, 1916? Okay, Sykes-Picot basically, they will literally, this is what they did. They came and looked at a map of the Middle East. They said, all right, this is what the map's going to look like now. And they literally drew lines. And this is actually, like historically, this is what they did. They just came, they drew lines based on how much land each was going to get. And they didn't take account, like, that's why Iraq today you have Sunnis, Kurds, and Shias. That was never like one singular nation. It lived under Islamic rule, but they were never like, if they actually thought about when they wanted to cut it up, they could have thought about it differently. But they didn't. They just did it based on resources and political, strategic politically. So that's how they literally made this. So Palestine, what happened is, Palestine went from the Ottoman control, officially, to British mandate right away. And then from British, it went to Israeli state right away. So Palestinians never were able to form official state. Jordan, for example, in the 50s, gained its independence. Okay, now Jordans have their own state apparatus. Israelis weren't there. The British left. They didn't have that. Same thing with Egypt. They kicked out the Malik Farouk in the 50s. They kicked them out. All right, now the Egyptians made their own state. Same thing with the Iraqis. Different. Palestinians never had that opportunity. In 1993, for the first time, officially, they created the Palestine National Authority, which was like this, supposed to be like the state authority or the governing body of the Palestinians, headed by Yasser Arafat and the PLO. But that was BS too, you know. You can't have a state apparatus that's controlled by another state apparatus. Like PLA was controlled by Israel. They could not make their own decisions. They could not issue like IDs to people. It had to be with the permission of Israel. I mean, that's how Israel wants it to be, basically. They want a subsidiary state, basically, under their own control. If there was ever to be a two-state solution and Palestinians had a state, Israel would want a demilitarized Palestinian state that's under their control. Nobody wants that. Nobody's going to live that way. Nobody wants that. Yes, sir.
For you, Taher, what's the best solution to the problem? I mean, if you can summarize.
Yeah, so the number one issue when it comes to Palestine, when you guys talk to people about Palestine, just like in relation to da'wah, it's tawheed. That's the number one thing you have to come back to. The number one issue in Palestine is occupation. Occupation. The end of the occupation needs to happen. In the West Bank, in Gaza, right? Those are the main things, according to the 1967 borders. So you need to end the occupation of Palestinian land. That's first and foremost. Then you have to give the right of return to the refugees. There's 7 million refugees today, Palestinian refugees in the world. That's the largest refugee population in the world, according to the United Nations. Okay? 67% live within the Palestinian territories. So internally displaced people. So people that lived in Jaffa, for example, I don't have a map of Palestine for you guys. I have another PowerPoint. People that lived in Haifa, people that lived in Jalil, that had to basically were transferred to the West Bank and Gaza. Those people are also internally displaced. Gaza's population is 80% refugee. There's 1.5 million people in Gaza, but they live in refugee camps. You know, so what happens to these people? What happens to the refugees in Lebanon that are treated like crap till this day? You know what I mean? What happens to the refugees in Jordan? I mean, the refugees in Egypt, the refugees in Syria. There's refugees everywhere. Refugees in Iraq, on the Iraqi border. Till this day, they're still there. Some of them came to America recently. They brought them here. But like, what happens to all these people? You know what I mean? Some of them still hold the keys from 1948 and the paperwork for that they own the homes. They still own it. They still have it. I've seen some keys that are huge, old style keys. You know. So people, what happens to these people? So that's one of the major things that I recommend is that if there were ever to be a real solution, you need to talk about those two main issues. Then also the status of Jerusalem. Jerusalem cannot be occupied by Zionists. And the way it was split is that you have West Jerusalem went to the state of Israel, East Jerusalem was supposed to be for the Palestinians, right? Where the Masjid al-Aqsa is and all that. But the problem is that Israelis are building settlements in East Jerusalem. They're trying to create facts on the ground. So they're coming and they're saying, okay, we're here, we're not going anywhere. Move us now if you can. How are you supposed to create a state when you're creating facts on the ground in the other state? The West Bank is supposed to be Palestinian territory. Yet Palestinians have control of 13% of the land in the West Bank. How's that a state? You cannot have a state when people are occupying you, build a wall on your land, have checkpoints, and you have to have a special permit to pass. It's not a state. So these things need to end. That's what I mean by occupation. Is that you have to take that all out. There's 500,000 settlers living in the West Bank today. There was settlers living in the Sinai when they had to withdraw. In 1967, Israel took over the Sinai Peninsula. They put settlers in that area for a while. Until 1979, they made a peace agreement with Egypt and they had to withdraw. They had to pull settlers out of it. Literally, it was like a civil war almost in Israel. Settlers are hardcore. They don't want to leave their land. In Gaza in 2005, for example, they had settlers in Gaza and they wanted to withdraw. Ariel Sharon tried to withdraw the settlers. And I'll talk about that a little bit. But they withdrew the settlers. People were like going crazy. The settlers were going crazy. They were like trying to kill their own soldiers. They would not want to leave. They're hardcore settlers. They want to stay. They believe this is God gave them this land. This is the God-given right, and we're here to stay. That's how they feel it is. So these 500,000 settlers, by the way, many of them armed, highly armed, trained individuals. They served in IDF, and they're not like civilians in a sense. You know how they say civilian society, you have to deal with them. You can't really do that. You can't really attack them. I mean, they're not really civilians. I mean, they may be not on duty in the military, but these guys are highly armed individuals. You see them sometimes taking pot shots from the settlements, because the settlements usually are on top of the hills in Palestine. If you go to any, you go like here, the suburban neighborhoods look like what the settlements look like over there, on top of the hills though. And you see them sometimes they're sniping people out from like the top of the building, just messing around, like 17-year-olds taking target practice. That's how they are. That's what they do. They're hardcore people. So that definitely needs to end. If there was ever a solution. My ultimate solution is one state. Ultimate solution is one state. Open it up. Jews don't have to leave. Don't have to go back to Europe. But they have to leave the areas that are portioned to Palestine. Right? Have an open system where people are able to vote. People are able to partake in a democratic process. That's fine. Nobody said no to that. You know what I mean? Nobody said Jews can't live in Palestine. That's fine. Jews lived always in Palestine before even the state of Israel was established. But the problem is when you take people's land, when you persecute them, when you massacre their children, that thing's obviously going to become a problem. You're going to have a resistance to that. So that's where ultimately the solution lies. Ultimately where the solution is. Anybody else have a question? Sorry for talking a lot, guys.
Allah khair, Brother Taher, if we can have another round of applause for him. So inshallah you guys gained a lot of information. This is a very important topic, so hopefully you guys were able to sink all that in, inshallah. And again, if you guys have questions, please feel free to ask Brother Taher. We have pizza for you guys in the back. If you guys have never had pizza from Marcelo's, don't worry, it's all halal, so don't get freaked out if you see pepperoni on the pizza. It's beef, so don't worry about it. Other than that, Jazakallah khair guys for coming. Don't forget to look out for the updates on what's going on next week, inshallah, with the homeless feeding and all of the different banquets that we got going on. And RIS this weekend, inshallah. So if you guys need tickets, $50, you see our discount. See Brother Sayyid, he's selling tickets. And don't forget about the fundraiser that we have coming up. If you guys are interested in the portable prayer rugs, let me know, inshallah. And then as soon as we get the shipment, it'll be $5 each, and the money will go to different areas that need help. So.
One last thing, guys. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm going to give you some books to read just in case.